At this month's new iPhone event, Tim Cook confirmed what most of us knew all along. The cheap iPhone XR is the company's best-selling phone. So, how does Apple take that success and try to keep that momentum going? Well, if you're Apple in this case, you cook up a few new colors, you add a camera, you make sure the new cheap model is as fast as the expensive ones, and you sell all that for a little bit less. That's the iPhone 11 in a nutshell. And yeah, the formula is pretty straightforward, but that's fine by me, because the end result is an iPhone that delivers, among other things, up-to-date performance and great battery life for $700. The iPhone 11 isn't nearly as flashy as either of the new iPhone 11 Pros, but it doesn't matter. It's still the best iPhone, I think, for most people. Let's take a closer look. I know what some of you are thinking right out of the gate. The iPhone 11 looks a lot like last year's XR. Well, yeah, you're right. The 11's frame is still made out of aluminum instead of steel, and the 6.1-inch Liqui Retina display up front, that's essentially the same screen we got a year ago. And I know that might rub some of you the wrong way, since it technically does run at a sub 1080p resolution, and the nature of LCD screens means the phone has to have some notable bezels around it. If that bugs you, fair enough. You'd better go look at the Pros instead. But for anyone who doesn't plan to push their nose right up against that glass, the screen is more than good enough. It's bright, it reproduces color well, and when you're using it at a normal distance from your face, you're never going to have to worry about seeing individual pixels. Oh, and since this screen is bigger than the iPhone 11 Pros and smaller than the Pro Maxes, it sits in that Goldilocks zone of readability and ease of use. This is the right-sized iPhone for me, and if Apple's sales are any indication, it's right for a lot of other people too. Anyway, aside from new color options like purple and this particularly nice minty green, the only real change here you'll notice is the dual camera setup around back, and that's probably because it looks kind of weird. I can't not see a bug-eyed baby alien with a pacifier when I look at this thing. I might have more of a problem with that though if I didn't enjoy using these cameras so much. You'll probably spend most of your time with the standard 12 megapixel wide camera, so it's a good thing it works as well as it does. Apple says the sensor is absolutely covered in focus pixels, which kind of explains why it locks onto subjects so quickly, and the on-by-default Smart HDR gives your photos some slightly punchier colors and some sharpened details. The effect is not anywhere near as aggressive as what you'd see out of a Samsung camera, and whether that's a good thing is really up to you. But I do have to say that Apple's approach leads to somewhat neutral photos that more accurately depict what's in front of you, if that's what you're after. This main camera also packs optical image stabilization and a wide f1.8 aperture, so it's a pretty solid performer in low light too. If you're really planning to go nuts shooting inside bars or in the wee hours of the night, you should probably rely on Apple's new night mode, which kicks in automatically when it's dark out. When you're shooting with the 11 in your hands, it'll usually capture 3 to 5 second exposures, although that can reach up to 30 seconds if the phone is particularly still, and the results are pretty good. They're not quite as vivid as what you'd get from a Pixel 3, but then again, they also don't look like the camera tried to turn a night photo into a daytime shot. Samsung's cameras are especially guilty of that, and Apple's more measured approach here seems like the better way to go. And then there's that new ultra-wide camera. Because it captures a 120-degree field of view, it's really more of a pinch hitter when you're shooting landscapes or working in really tight spaces where you can't move around and reframe your shots. Just to be absolutely clear, the real draw with this camera is the extra sense of space and nuance it gives your photos. It generally doesn't make photos that are quite as crisply detailed as ones shot with the standard wide camera, but I think the flexibility it gives you is generally worth the trade-off, although I'm sure not everyone will agree. If nothing else though, these super wide shots will still look good on a phone screen. There are just a few other things I want to mention here. Since there are 2 of these cameras now, you can take portrait photos of cats and dogs and really anything you want instead of just people's faces. The front-facing camera got a bump to 12 megapixels, and it takes really great selfies too, and if you can get over the really just bad name, you can shoot slowfies or slow-motion video clips. The frame rate tops out at 120 frames per second, so don't expect super slow motion, but there is still plenty of weird fun to be had here. Oh, and shooting video with the iPhone 11 is kind of a joy, too. You can shoot at resolutions as high as 4K 60, and the phone does a surprisingly good job of correctly exposing and saturating all of the different elements in your scene. Apart from lacking that telephoto camera, using the iPhone 11 feels a lot like using the iPhone 11 Pro and the Pro Max. That's mostly because they all run iOS 13 and they all use the same A13 Bionic chipset. In other words, the iPhone 11 costs $300 less than the iPhone 11 Pro, but it doesn't act like it does. You're getting full flagship performance here. The thing to keep in mind is if you bought one of the new iPhones last year, you're probably not going to notice a huge difference in performance. In fact, if you bought one of the new iPhones last year, you probably don't need to worry about upgrading for a while anyway. If you've been using the same phone for a couple years now though, well, you're in for some big changes. The A13 Bionic is an incredibly fast chip, and you'll notice your apps launching and loading much faster than before, especially if you're using a phone older than the iPhone 10. Visually intense games run like a dream here, and thanks to some significant upgrades to the chipset's neural engine, you'll notice apps and services that rely on complex machine learning models running much better than before. And these upgrades are especially helpful for augmented reality apps like IKEA Place and Angry Birds AR. The virtual objects you drop into the world around you are lit correctly and they feel more like they're rooted in the real world, if only just. If there was one reason why I loved last year's iPhone XR so much, it was because of its fantastic battery life. It lasted longer than any iPhone I had tested up until then. Because the A13 was designed to run more efficiently, this year's iPhone 11 does even better, if only by a little bit. I could usually count on the XR to last around 15 to 16 hours on a single charge, but the iPhone 11 has hit up to 17 hours. That's not a huge increase, but considering how good XR users had it last year, the fact that we've got better battery life here even marginally is, I think, worth a golf clap, right? So yeah, the iPhone 11 is a pretty impressive little package given the price. The interesting thing is it stands to get better very soon, too. All of the iPhone 11s will get the iOS 13.1 update around September 30th, which will iron out some of the camera and interface bugs I've mostly experienced on the iPhone Pros. That update will also make use of the currently dormant U1 ultra-wideband chip inside these devices by allowing iPhone 11 and Pro owners to airdrop files to each other by pointing their phones at people. And beyond all that, the iPhone 11 will get Apple's Deep Fusion camera feature sometime this fall. If everything the company says about this computational photography tool is accurate, it could turn these iPhones into real serious Pixel 4 camera competitors. At the end of it all, it's hard not to like the iPhone 11. It takes almost everything that makes the iPhone 11 Pro and Pro Max special and squeezes it down into a package that more people get to benefit from. It's probably not worth buying if you have an iPhone XR or a XS, but for everyone else, it's the easiest way to get a taste of modern flagship iPhone performance without dropping $1,000. In fact, I might actually just go buy one of these for myself right now. This has been a really busy week. We've reviewed all of the new iPhones, so thank you for watching this one. Make sure you watch the other ones, and if you liked what we did, be sure to subscribe.